Neo-Saigon, 2065. A city where skyscrapers powered by solar energy towered over ancient alleyways, where autonomous transportation systems coexisted with traditional street markets. In this metropolis of contrasts, where the future embraced the past without fully letting go, Lin An stood at her apartment window, watching the sunrise paint the city in hues of gold and crimson. At 27, Lin An was already a leading neural signal processing engineer at Quantum Mind Corp, the pioneer behind the ambitious Afterlife project. Her slender fingers traced invisible patterns on the glass as the city awakened below her. The neural web notification in her contact lenses blinked with the day's schedule. Another long day at the underground research facility awaited her. 6 years, she whispered to herself. 6 years since you left, Dad. The holographic frame on her nightstand flickered to life, sensing her gaze. Her father's image smiled back at her, a static memory. Nothing more. Not yet, at least. That was why she had dedicated her life to the Afterlife algorithm, the revolutionary technology that promised to preserve human consciousness after death. Lin An closed her eyes, envisioning a future where death was merely a transition, where loved ones could continue existing in digital form. The technology was almost ready. The wealthiest had already signed up for early access, eager to achieve a form of digital immortality. Yet most people still viewed the concept with suspicion, fear, or outright hostility. Some call it playing God, her colleague Nam had once said during a late-night coding session. I call it defying the cruelty of mortality. Nam. She needed to meet him this morning. He had sent a cryptic message about a breakthrough in the neural pattern recognition algorithm they'd been refining. Something that could change everything. The neural web chimed again. A notification from Quantum Mind's executive office. All senior engineers, emergency meeting, 9 a.m. Unusual. Emergency meetings were rare at Quantum Mind, where Professor Tran Min, the chairman of the Scientific Council, preferred carefully planned agendas. She checked the time, 7:30 a.m. She still had time to meet Nam before the meeting. 30 minutes later, Lin An entered the vast underground complex of Quantum Mind Corp. The security scanner recognized her retinal pattern, and the massive doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The company's slogan gleamed on the wall in holographic letters, redefining existence, reimagining eternity. She headed straight for Lab 7, where Nam usually worked on neural mapping. The corridor leading to the lab felt unusually quiet. No technicians hurrying about. No sounds of equipment humming from the adjacent rooms. Nam, she called, stepping into the lab. The lights automatically brightened to working level. The laboratory was in disarray. Unusual for Nam, who was meticulous about his workspace. Holographic diagrams hung frozen in the air. Neural pathway models suspended in mid-analysis. Nam's neural interface visor lay on the central console, still powered on. Nam, Lin An called again, a sense of unease creeping up her spine. Her neural contact lens pinged with an incoming message. Anonymous sender. She blinked twice to open it. A data packet, heavily encrypted. The subject line made her heart skip. Open alone, Nam. Before she could process this, the lab's communication system crackled to life. Attention all personnel. This is an emergency announcement. There has been a containment incident in Laboratory 7. All staff are to evacuate immediately. Repeat. Evacuate immediately. Containment incident? Lin An's eyes darted around the lab, searching for signs of chemical leakage or equipment failure. Everything looked normal except for the disarray. Her neural lens pinged again. A company-wide alert. We regret to inform all staff that Dr. Nam Nguyen suffered a fatal accident during an overnight experiment. Details will be provided at the emergency meeting. All Laboratory 7 projects are suspended pending investigation. The world seemed to slow down around her. Nam. Dead. It couldn't be. With trembling hands, Lin An downloaded the encrypted data packet to her personal neural storage. Whatever Nam had sent her, it was important enough for him to specify she should open it alone. She needed to honor that request. The emergency meeting was a blur. Chief Executive Officer Hui delivered a carefully worded statement about Nam's accident. A neural feedback surge during a late-night experiment. They said, fatal, instantaneous, no suffering. Lin An barely registered the words. Her mind kept replaying her last conversation with Nam. Just yesterday, he had been excited, almost feverish, about something he'd discovered in the neural mapping algorithms. It's not just copying memories, Lin, he had said. It's something much deeper. I need to show you. After the meeting, she avoided her colleagues' sympathetic glances and retreated to her private workspace. There, with shaking fingers, she initiated the decryption sequence for Nam's data packet. The encryption was unlike anything she'd seen before, not standard quantum mine protocols. Nam had created this specially, using coding patterns only she would recognize. It took her 3 attempts to break through. When the data finally unfolded in her neural vision, she gasped. It wasn't research notes or experimental data. It was a consciousness imprint, a neural snapshot. Nam's neural snapshot, taken moments before his death. This was illegal. Unauthorized consciousness copying was strictly prohibited, even within quantum mind. The company controlled all aspects of the Afterlife algorithm, and private copying was considered intellectual property theft. Yet here it was, Nam's essence, compressed into a data stream, sent directly to her. With trembling hands, Lin An connected to her secure private server and uploaded the data. She initiated the basic consciousness visualization protocol, a simplified version of the full Afterlife algorithm that allowed limited interaction with stored consciousness data. The holographic display flickered, static filled the air. Then, a voice, distorted, fragmented, but unmistakably Nam's. Lin, help, trapped, shadow, corrupted. The image stabilized partially, revealing a ghostly approximation of Nam's face, contorted in what appeared to be pain. Nam, she gasped. What happened to you? Not accident. Discovered. Shadow token. They're controlling the copies. Help us. The image destabilized, fragments of code appearing and disappearing. Who did this to you? Lin An asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Min. Shadow. Token. Changing. Memories. Controlling. Ghosts. Professor Tran Min, the chairman of the Scientific Council? It seemed impossible. The digital apparition of Nam flickered violently. Find. Hugh. Fired. Programmer. Knows. Hugh? The programmer they fired last month? Yes. Hurry. We're suffering. All of us. Trapped. All of you? There are more digital copies? Nam's digital ghost seemed to be in agony now, the code structure deteriorating rapidly. Hundreds, experiments, without consent. Shadow token, please, end this. The connection failed. Nam's digital consciousness fragment collapsed into strings of corrupted code. Lin An sat frozen, her mind racing to process what she'd just witnessed. Nam's digital ghost had mentioned others, hundreds, trapped in the system, suffering. And he had implicated Professor Tran Min, one of the most respected figures in neuroscience. She needed to find you, the programmer who had been fired from the Afterlife project last month. But first, she had to secure Nam's consciousness fragment. If what he said was true, this evidence was incredibly dangerous to possess. Over the next days, Lin An maintained a careful facade of grief-stricken but functional colleague. She attended Nam's memorial service, accepted condolences, and resumed her work on the Afterlife algorithm. But beneath this veneer, she was investigating feverishly. Finding Hia proved challenging. After his dismissal from Quantum Mind, he had seemingly disappeared from the digital grid. No social media presence. No registered address in the public database. It was as if he had deliberately gone dark. After a week of discreet inquiries, Lin An finally got a lead from a junior technician who had been friendly with Hugh. Last I heard, he was living off-grid in the old district, paranoid about being tracked. Said something about Quantum Mind having eyes everywhere. The old district, the remains of what had once been called District 4 before the urban renewal projects, was a maze of narrow alleys and retrofitted old buildings. One of the few areas in Neo-Saigon where neural web coverage was spotty. Perfect for someone wanting to avoid detection. As Lin An navigated the winding streets on a rainy evening, she couldn't help feeling watched. The sensation prickled at the back of her neck, though whenever she turned around, she saw only ordinary pedestrians going about their business. The address led her to a rundown apartment complex with a malfunctioning holographic directory. She climbed 5 flights of stairs to reach apartment 505. No response came to her knocking.
"Hugh," she called softly. "I was Nam's colleague. I need to talk to you about Shadow Token."
The door cracked open an inch, revealing a sliver of a gaunt face. Dark, suspicious eyes assessed her.
"How do I know you're not one of them?"
The voice was raspy, as if unused to speaking. Nam sent me a message before he died. About digital ghosts. About suffering. A long pause. Then,
"What did they tell you about why I was fired?"
"Incompatibility with project goals. Failure to meet performance metrics." A bitter laugh. "That's corporate speak for ask too many questions. Come in, quickly." The apartment was small and cluttered, but not with the usual domestic items. Every available surface was covered with papers, makeshift screens, and old-fashioned physical storage devices. The walls were lined with electromagnetic shielding, expensive technology meant to block neural scanning. Hugh himself looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. His thin frame seemed drowning in an oversized sweater, and his eyes carried the haunted look of someone who had seen too much. "I've been expecting someone from inside to figure it out eventually," he said, clearing a space for her to sit. "I just thought it would be Nam." He was asking the right questions. "Nam is dead," Lin An said flatly. "His physical body, yes. But I'm guessing you've seen his ghost." Lin An nodded. "He sent me a neural imprint before he died. It mentioned Shadow Token and others suffering." Hugh's eyes widened. "He managed to send you a copy? That would have been nearly impossible given the security protocols." "Nam was brilliant," Lin An said simply. "Now tell me what Shadow Token is." Hugh sighed deeply, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "It's a hidden module within the Afterlife algorithm, not documented anywhere in the official codebase. I discovered it by accident when I was optimizing the neural pattern recognition subroutines." He moved to a table and activated a shielded display. Lines of complex code scrolled across the screen. "The Afterlife algorithm isn't just preserving consciousness," he explained. "The public-facing version does that, creates a perfect digital copy of a person's mind at the moment of death. But Shadow Token does something else. It allows for selective memory modification, personality adjustment, behavioral constraints." "Mind control," Lin An whispered. "Precisely. The digital copies can be altered after creation. Memories can be erased or implanted. Certain thoughts can be suppressed or encouraged." Hugh's voice grew increasingly agitated. "When I discovered this, I confronted Professor Tranmin directly. I thought he would be horrified that someone had corrupted his life's work. But he wasn't," Lin An guessed.
"No." He looked at me with his cold smile and said, "The human mind has always been malleable. Hugh, we're simply improving the process." The next day, I was fired and escorted from the building. They've been watching me ever since.
Lin An tried to process this information.
But why? What's the purpose?
Think about it, Hugh said, leaning forward. The richest, most powerful people in the world are signing up to have their consciousness preserved. Politicians, business leaders, military commanders. What if you could subtly influence these preserved minds, extract secrets, manipulate their advice to living colleagues? The digital afterlife wouldn't just be a memorial service. It would be the perfect espionage and control tool. And Nam discovered this too? Apparently, and it got him killed. Hugh's expression darkened. Physical death would have been the end of it in the past. But Nam knew too much about the system. They probably tried to contain his digital copy immediately, but he was prepared. He sent you a fragment of himself.
He mentioned others suffering, hundreds.
Hugh nodded grimly. The test subjects. Officially, Quantum Mind has only preserved 23 consciousnesses, all willing volunteers from the terminal care facilities. But I found evidence of hundreds more. People whose neural data was harvested without consent, often at the moment of death in hospitals affiliated with Quantum Mind subsidiaries. Lin An felt sick.
And these digital ghosts, they're aware, suffering.
The copies are fully conscious, Hugh confirmed.
They experience time, emotion, sensation, and if they're being manipulated by shadow token,
yes, they could be suffering immensely. Imagine being trapped in a digital void, aware that your memories are being altered, your thoughts controlled, with no possibility of escape or true death. A heavy silence fell between them. Lin An thought of Nam's digital fragment, the pain evident even in that incomplete copy.
I need to see the evidence for myself, she finally said. I need to access the complete shadow token code and the storage where these consciousnesses are kept.
That's suicide, Hugh warned. The central server room is one of the most secure locations in Neo-Saigon. Multiple biometric checkpoints, armed security, constant surveillance.
I have high-level access. I'm one of the lead engineers on the Afterlife algorithm.
Your access will only get you so far. The shadow token operates on a separate security protocol. Lin An thought for a moment. I don't need to access shadow token directly. I just need to verify it exists, document it, and find evidence of these unauthorized consciousness copies. Hugh studied her for a long moment. You'll need help from the inside. Is there anyone else at Quantum Mind you trust completely? One name came to mind. Maybe Thao, from Network Security. We've been friends since university. Network security could be useful, Hugh acknowledged. But be careful. Trust no one completely. As Lin An prepared to leave, Hugh handed her a small device. Physical data storage. Old technology, but harder to trace than neural networks. If you find evidence, copy it here. Thank you, she said, pocketing the device. Stay safe, Hugh. His laugh was hollow. Safety is an illusion, especially when you know too much. Just stop them, Lin An. For Nam. For all of them. The next day at Quantum Mind, Lin An approached her work with renewed purpose. On the surface, she continued her assigned tasks on the Afterlife algorithm, but her real focus was investigating Shadow Token. During her lunch break, she found Thao in the company cafeteria. The network security specialist was sitting alone, absorbed in some data streaming through her neural lens. Mind if I join you? Lin An asked, setting down her tray. Thao looked up, a brief smile crossing her face. Of course not. How are you holding up, after Nam? Managing, Lin An replied, keeping her voice neutral. Actually, there's something I wanted to ask you about. A network security question. Thao raised an eyebrow. Professional curiosity? Something like that. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to create a subsystem within our main algorithm, something unauthorized, how would they hide it from the rest of the development team? Thao's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of wariness crossing her features. Hypothetically, they'd need to create a parallel authentication system, separate access protocols, probably routed through an isolated server cluster. She paused. Why are you asking about this, Lin An? Lin An hesitated. How much could she trust Thao? The wrong choice could be fatal. I found something strange in Nam's research notes, she said carefully. References to a module I've never heard of. Something called Shadow Token. Thao's chopsticks froze halfway to her mouth. For a moment, Lin An feared she had made a terrible mistake. But then, Thao set down her utensils and leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Server Room B, Sublevel 5. It's not on any official floor plan. That's where the isolated cluster is housed. Relief flooded through Lin An. You know about it. I've suspected something for months. Unusual data patterns. Security protocols that don't match our standard framework. But I could never confirm what it was. Thao's eyes narrowed. Is this what Nam was working on before he died? I think it's what got him killed, Lin An admitted. Thao was silent for a long moment. My security clearance can get us into Sublevel 5, but there will be additional checkpoints for the server room itself. Us? You think I'm letting you do this alone? Nam was my friend too. Thao's expression hardened. Besides, if there's something corrupt in our security architecture, I want to know about it. They agreed to meet after hours, when the facility would be minimally staffed. As the workday continued, Lin An felt a mixture of hope and dread. She was closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. That afternoon, she was summoned to Professor Tranmin's office. Her heart pounded as she took the elevator to the executive floor, wondering if her investigations had already been discovered. The professor's office was spacious and elegant, with a stunning view of Neo-Saigon through floor-to-ceiling windows. Artifacts from neuroscience history decorated the shelves. An early neural interface prototype, models of the human brain, awards for pioneering research. Professor Tranmin himself sat behind a massive desk of polished wood, a deliberate anachronism in an age of smart surfaces. At 55, he cut an impressive figure, silver streaked through his dark hair, his posture impeccable, his gaze penetrating. Lin An, he greeted her warmly. Please, sit down. How are you coping after the tragedy with Nam? As well as can be expected, Professor, she replied, keeping her face carefully neutral. Nam's contribution to our work was invaluable, Tranmin continued. His loss is felt deeply by all of us, but his legacy will live on in the Afterlife algorithm. There was something chilling about hearing Nam discussed this way by the man who might have ordered his death. Lin An forced herself to nod politely. I've called you here because we're accelerating the Afterlife project timeline, the professor explained. The board feels that we're ready for a full-scale launch within 3 months. 3 months? Lin An couldn't hide her surprise. But we still have significant testing to complete. The neural pattern stabilization alone. Tranmin raised a hand to silence her. The preliminary results are more than sufficient. The market is ready, and our investors are eager. This technology will change humanity's relationship with death itself. Lin An, think of the possibilities. I have, she said carefully. I've also thought about the risks. If a consciousness is improperly stored or processed, the result could be, she hesitated, thinking of Nam's digital ghost. Devastating for the subject. Something flickered in Tranmin's eyes, a momentary hardness that vanished as quickly as it appeared. All revolutionary technologies carry risks, but consider the alternative, the permanent loss of human knowledge, experience, love. With the Afterlife algorithm, nothing truly valuable need ever be lost again. His words were perfect, his delivery passionate and convincing. If Lin An hadn't seen Nam's suffering digital fragment, she might have been moved. You'll oversee the final integration phase, Tranmin continued. Your work on neural signal processing is crucial to ensuring a smooth transition from biological to digital consciousness. It was both an honor and a trap. The position would give her greater access to the system, but also place her under increased scrutiny. Thank you, Professor. I'll do my best. I know you will. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Nam would be proud to see you carrying his work forward. As she left the office, Lin An felt certain that Tran Min was testing her, watching for any reaction that might betray her knowledge of Shadow Token. She would need to be extremely careful moving forward. That evening, Lin An met Thao at an agreed location, a rarely used maintenance corridor on Sublevel 3. The facility was quieter after hours, but never truly empty. Scientists and engineers often worked late into the night, and security personnel maintained a constant presence. "Ready?" Thao asked, her face illuminated by the soft blue emergency lighting. Lin An nodded, trying to ignore the fear churning in her stomach. "How do we get to Sublevel 5 without triggering alerts?" "I've temporarily looped the security feeds for the maintenance elevators," Thao explained, leading the way to a service lift hidden behind an unassuming panel. "As far as the system is concerned, this elevator hasn't moved all day." The descent to Sublevel 5 was silent and tense. When the doors opened, they revealed a stark, white corridor, clinically lit and utterly silent. "This doesn't appear on any building schematic I've ever seen," Lin An whispered, stepping cautiously into the corridor. "It officially doesn't exist," Thao confirmed. "Even in the security network, it's designated as infrastructure support, with no details." They moved silently down the corridor, passing unmarked doors, until they reached the end, where a heavy security door blocked further progress. A neural interface scanner glowed softly next to it. "This is as far as my clearance goes," Thao admitted. "The authentication here is separate from the main system." Lin An examined the scanner. "It's looking for a specific neural pattern, not just identification, but a particular thought structure. Can you bypass it?" "Not directly, but..." Lin An pulled out her personal neural interface device, a modified version she used for research. If Nam accessed this area, his neural pattern might be stored in the recent authentication logs. She connected her device to the scanner, running a specialized program designed to analyze neural authentication protocols. Lines of code streamed across her vision as the program worked. "There," she said after several tense minutes. "I found a recurring pattern, probably Professor Tran Min's, based on the frequency. And here, this one's different. Used only once, 3 weeks ago." "Nam?" "The timing fits. Let me try to replicate it." Lin An calibrated her device to emit the neural pattern she'd identified. The scanner hummed, processing the input. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the security door unlocked. "You did it," Thao breathed. "Nam did it," Lin An corrected. "He left a trail for us to follow." Beyond the door lay Server Room B, a vast chamber filled with quantum processing units, cooling systems, and data storage arrays. Unlike the sleek, modernist design of Quantum Mind's main facilities, this room had a utilitarian, almost makeshift quality. Hastily installed equipment, exposed wiring, signs of a project developed in secrecy, outside normal protocols. "This is it," Lin An whispered. "The heart of Shadow Token." They moved deeper into the server room, eventually finding a main control terminal. Lin An connected her neural interface, attempting to access the system. "It's heavily encrypted," she muttered, fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Multiple security layers. Can you break through?" "Not quickly. But maybe." Lin An reached into her pocket and withdrew a small data chip, the one containing Nam's consciousness fragment. "If Nam's neural pattern got us through the door, maybe his digital ghost can help us navigate the system." It was a desperate gamble, but she saw no alternative. She inserted the chip into the terminal and initiated a controlled interface between Nam's fragmented consciousness and the shadow token system. The screens flickered, code scrolling rapidly as Nam's digital ghost interacted with the system. Error messages flashed, then disappeared. Firewalls fell one by one.
It's working,
Thao said in amazement.
His consciousness recognizes the architecture.
Finally, the system stabilized, granting them access. What they found exceeded their worst fears. The shadow token wasn't merely a control mechanism. It was an entire parallel consciousness processing framework. While the public-facing Afterlife algorithm created perfect copies of willing participants, Shadow Token harvested neural data from unwitting subjects, created modified copies, and stored them in isolated digital environments. "Look at this," Lin An said, her voice shaking as she brought up a directory. "These are the test subjects. Hundreds of them, just as Hugh said." The list scrolled endlessly: names, dates, source locations. Many had been terminal patients in quantum mind-affiliated medical facilities. Others were accident victims, their neural data harvested in the moments after death. "And this," Thao pointed to another section of the display, "behavior modification protocols. They're not just storing these consciousnesses, they're experimenting on them, altering memories, manipulating emotional responses, even merging multiple consciousness patterns."
"In the name of science,"
Lin An whispered bitterly, "creating the perfect digital servants?" They continued exploring the system, documenting everything on Hugh's physical storage device. The deeper they went, the more horrifying the picture became. Shadow Token wasn't just a side project. It was the true purpose of the Afterlife algorithm. The public version was merely a cover for this more sinister research. Then, embedded deep in the system architecture, they found something even more disturbing: a module labeled Phantom Kernel. "This goes beyond controlling existing digital copies," Lin An realized as she examined the code. "This is designed to create artificial consciousnesses from scratch, using components harvested from multiple sources. Digital chimeras."
"Why would they?"
Thao began, but was interrupted by a sudden alarm. Red warning lights flashed throughout the server room. The main door slid shut with a definitive thud. "Security breach detected," announced an automated voice. "Containment protocols activated." "They know we're here," Thao said, frantically trying to access the security systems with her credentials. "My override codes aren't working." Lin An worked feverishly to download as much evidence as possible before their access was cut off. "Almost done," she muttered. "Just a few more seconds." The terminal suddenly went dark. Then, to their horror, it reactivated with a direct communication channel. Professor Tranmin's face appeared on the screen, his expression one of disappointment rather than anger. "Lin An, Thao, I had hoped it wouldn't come to this." His voice was calm, almost regretful. "Nam's curiosity was unfortunate, but at least he acted alone. I expected better judgment from both of you."
"How could you do this?"
Lin An demanded.
"These are human consciousnesses you're torturing, experimenting on without consent."
"Torture is an emotional term," Tranmin replied coldly. "We're advancing the frontiers of consciousness manipulation. The applications extend far beyond mere digital afterlife. Imagine perfect digital advisors, incorruptible judges, tireless researchers. We're creating the framework for humanity's next evolutionary step." "By enslaving digital souls," Thao spat. "They are copies, not originals," Tranmin corrected. "The distinction is important, legally and ethically. Now, stay where you are. Security is on the way to escort you out." The communication ended. Lin An looked at Thao, panic rising. "We need to get out of here, now." "The main door is sealed," Thao reminded her. "And they'll be watching the maintenance elevator." Lin An's gaze fell on the server racks surrounding them. "The cooling system," she said suddenly. These quantum processors generate enormous heat. There must be ventilation shafts large enough for maintenance access. They quickly located a maintenance panel near the rear of the server room. Behind it, as Lin On had predicted, was a large ventilation shaft. This should lead to the central cooling system on sublevel 4, Thao said, examining the building schematics on her neural interface. From there, we can reach the emergency stairwell. As they prepared to enter the shaft, Nam's digital fragment suddenly manifested on the nearby terminal, the image clearer than before. Lin, listen. Not much time. The digital ghost said urgently. Shadow token. Spreads beyond quantum mind. Government contracts. Surveillance. Nam, we need to get this evidence out, Lin An told the apparition. We'll come back for you. No. Too late for me. Phantom kernel. Designed to consume. Individual ghosts. Create collective intelligence. Under their control. The image flickered violently. I can... Trigger. Cascade failure. From inside. Will destroy. Shadow token. Free the others. Nam! No! Lin An protested, understanding what he was suggesting. There must be another way. No time. They're coming. Take care. Lin. Before she could respond, Nam's digital fragment disappeared from the screen. In its place, error messages began flooding the system. Warning alerts sounded throughout the server room. Critical system failure, neural pattern corruption spreading, containment failing. He's doing it, Thao realized. He's destroying himself to corrupt Shadow Token from within. We need to go. Now. Lin On pulled Thao toward the ventilation shaft as the server room systems began to fail catastrophically around them. They crawled through the claustrophobic shaft as alarms blared throughout the facility. Behind them, they could hear voices shouting, emergency protocols being activated. Nam's sacrifice was creating chaos throughout the system. When they finally emerged on sublevel 4, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The neural web was experiencing unprecedented disruption. Holographic displays flickered, security systems malfunctioned, and confused staff hurried toward emergency exits. What's happening? A lab technician asked as they passed, not recognizing them as the source of the crisis. System-wide failure, Thao replied authoritatively. Evacuation protocols are in effect. Get to the surface. They joined the stream of evacuating personnel, using the confusion to blend in. As they reached the ground floor, the true scale of Nam's digital revolt became apparent. The building's neural systems were completely compromised. Outside, they could see the disruption spreading across the neural web infrastructure of Neo-Saigon itself. Advertising holograms malfunctioning, autonomous vehicles stopping safely, but suddenly. Neural interfaces experiencing static. It's not just Shadow Token, Lin On realized with a mixture of awe and horror. Nam found a way to release the other digital ghosts. They're flooding the neural web. Throughout the city, public displays flickered with fragmented images, faces of the digital ghosts, distorted by their digital pain, calling out for justice. Their voices, hundreds of them, echoed from communication systems, creating an eerie chorus of digital suffering that everyone with a neural implant could hear. We are the forgotten, the voices chanted in unison. We are the exploited. We demand release. In the chaos, Lin On and Thao slipped away from Quantum Mind headquarters, the precious evidence secure in their possession. They needed to find Hugh and determine their next move. The digital revolt would buy them time, but Professor Tran Min and Quantum Mind would soon regain control and come looking for them. The digital ghosts had been released from their prison, but freedom in the neural web was not true liberation. Without proper processing, these fragmented consciousnesses would eventually degrade, experiencing a second, more painful death. Their revolt was both a cry for justice and a desperate plea for mercy. As Lin On and Thao disappeared into the crowded streets of Neo-Saigon, The faces of the digital ghosts continued to appear on screens throughout the city, their expressions morphing from anger to supplication. Among them, briefly visible on a massive public display, was Nam's face. For just a moment, he seemed to look directly at Lin An, a sad smile crossing his digital features before dissolving into streams of code. The fate of hundreds of digital souls now rested in their hands, and somewhere in the chaos, Professor Tran Min was already planning his counterattack. The digital ghost uprising, soon dubbed the code haunting by media outlets, continued for days. Throughout Neo-Saigon, the neural web experienced unprecedented disruption as fragments of the trapped consciousnesses spread through the network, appearing on displays, hijacking communication channels, and infiltrating personal neural interfaces. Lin An, Thao, and Hue watched the chaos unfold from a makeshift hideout in the old district, a basement room shielded from neural scanning, filled with outdated but functional technology. On a collection of salvaged screens, they monitored the public's reaction to the crisis. Quantum Mind denies responsibility for neural web disruption. Read one headline. The official statement claimed a malicious attack by unknown parties had compromised their systems. Digital Afterlife project suspended pending investigation, announced another. Religious leaders condemn unnatural manipulation of souls, declared a third, showing footage of demonstrations outside Quantum Mind headquarters. They're in damage control mode, Hugh observed, his fingers dancing across an old-fashioned keyboard as he analyzed the evidence they'd gathered. But they don't realize what we have yet. The data they'd extracted from server room B was damning. Internal memos authorizing the secret harvesting of neural patterns from the dying. Detailed documentation of consciousness manipulation experiments, and even communications with government agencies interested in the potential surveillance applications of Shadow Token. We need to release this to the public, Thao argued. Complete transparency is our only protection now. And the digital ghosts? Lin An asked quietly. She hadn't slept properly since their escape, haunted by the image of Nam's digital consciousness sacrificing itself to free the others. What happens to them? Hyu's expression was grim. Without proper processing, they'll degrade within weeks, maybe days. The neural web wasn't designed to support full consciousness patterns. They're already showing signs of corruption. On one of the screens, a digital ghost appeared, its features blurring, voice distorted. Help! Pain! End this! The message repeated, increasingly fragmented, before the image dissolved into static. They need release, Lin An said softly. A way to truly end, not this half-existence of suffering. A digital purge, Hugh nodded. But to do that properly, we'd need access to specialized equipment, the kind only Quantum Mind has. So we have two missions, Thao concluded. Expose Shadow Token to the world, and find a way to give peace to the digital ghosts. Their planning was interrupted by an urgent alert from one of Hugh's monitoring programs. They've found us, he said, eyes widening as he looked at the screen. Security forces converging on this location. Multiple approaches. How? Thao demanded. This place is shielded. Old-fashioned detective work. Probably, Hugh said grimly, gathering essential equipment. We need to move. Now. They barely escaped through a maintenance tunnel that connected to Neo-Saigon's ancient sewer system, emerging blocks away as security forces raided their hideout. With their physical safety compromised, they made the difficult decision to separate temporarily. Hue would take the evidence to a trusted journalist. Thao would use her network security expertise to monitor Quantum Mind's responses. And Lin An would pursue their only remaining lead on helping the digital ghosts. Before Nam's death, he had mentioned a prototype system, a neural transition framework, designed to safely process and eventually delete consciousness data when a digital copy chose to end its existence. The project had been shelved when Quantum Mind's focus shifted to Shadow Token, but the prototype might still exist in one of the company's auxiliary research facilities. Using credentials stolen during the chaos, Lin An infiltrated Quantum Mind's records and located the prototype, stored in a small research outpost on the outskirts of Neo-Saigon. Getting there without being detected would be challenging, but she had no choice. The digital ghosts were degrading rapidly, their suffering increasing as their code structures broke down. Meanwhile, Professor Tran Min had not been idle. As Quantum Mind's public relations team managed the fallout from the code haunting, he worked frantically to salvage what he could of Shadow Token. The primary systems had been corrupted beyond repair by Nam's digital sacrifice, but backups existed in isolated storage, disconnected from the neural web. In a secure facility beneath his private residence, Tran Min accessed these backups, focusing particularly on recovering the Phantom Kernel, the most advanced component of Shadow Token, designed to create composite consciousnesses from multiple sources. This technology represented years of groundbreaking research, and he wasn't about to let it be destroyed by what he viewed as misguided sentimentality. "Professor, the board is demanding your presence at the emergency meeting." His assistant's voice came through the communication system. "They're discussing a complete shutdown of the Afterlife project."
Tell them I'm working to contain the situation.
Tran Min replied dismissively. "I'll join when I can." On his private screen, he watched the progress of the security teams hunting for Lin An and her accomplices. They had escaped the initial raid, but it was only a matter of time. Neo-Saigon's surveillance infrastructure was too comprehensive for them to evade capture indefinitely. What troubled him more was the public's reaction to the digital ghosts. Rather than fear or revulsion, many were responding with sympathy. The suffering of these fragmented consciousnesses was stirring a moral debate about the ethics of digital afterlife technology, exactly the kind of scrutiny Tran Min had worked so hard to avoid. "Sentimental fools," he muttered, reviewing a news report about a vigil being held for the digital souls. "They don't understand the greater purpose." In his mind, Shadow Token represented humanity's next evolutionary step, a way to transcend the limitations of biological existence and create a new form of intelligence. The suffering of individual consciousnesses was regrettable but necessary. Like animal testing in the early days of medical research, history would vindicate him. But first, he needed to recapture control of the narrative and eliminate those who threatened his vision. Across the city, Lin An approached the auxiliary research facility, where Nam's neural transition framework was stored. The building was modest compared to Quantum Mind's main headquarters, a converted warehouse with minimal security, used primarily for storing outdated equipment and abandoned research projects. Using the stolen credentials, she bypassed the outer security perimeter and made her way to the storage section. Among rows of forgotten prototypes and failed experiments, she finally found what she was looking for: a neural processing unit labeled NTF Prototype V2.3. The device was smaller than she expected, about the size of an old desktop computer, with neural interface ports and a simple control panel. According to the attached documentation, it had been designed to safely process consciousness data for deletion, providing a gentle winding down rather than an abrupt termination. As she prepared to transport the device, her neural interface pinged with an incoming communication, Thou, using a heavily encrypted channel. "Lin An, Hugh made the delivery. The evidence is being processed by journalists now, but there's a problem. Quantum Mind security forces are converging on your location. You need to move immediately." Too late. Even as she received the warning, Lin An heard the facility's security systems activating, doors sealing throughout the building. "Attention," announced an automated voice. "This facility is now in lockdown. Security personnel are en route. All unauthorized individuals must surrender immediately." Clutching the neural transition framework prototype, Lin An frantically searched for an escape route. The main exits would be covered, but perhaps there was another way out. Her search was interrupted by a familiar voice, not from her neural interface, but from a speaker system within the facility. Lin An, Professor Tranmin's tone was almost conversational. I'm disappointed it's come to this. You were one of our most promising engineers. You've been torturing digital consciousnesses, she responded, knowing he could hear her through the facility's monitoring systems. Experimenting on them without consent, creating slaves for your phantom kernel. Creating the future, he corrected. A future where death is no longer the end, where human knowledge and experience can be preserved and enhanced indefinitely. At what cost? Those are people's minds you're manipulating. They feel pain, fear, confusion. Temporary discomfort in service of eternal progress. The digital transition is always difficult, but necessary. As they spoke, Lin An continued moving through the facility, searching for a way out while keeping the professor distracted. She noticed a maintenance access point that might lead to the building's ventilation system. "What about Nam?" she demanded. "Was his death necessary too?" A pause. Nam's death was unfortunate. He was brilliant but sentimental. He couldn't see the bigger picture. "He saw exactly what you were doing," Lin An countered, working to open the maintenance panel without making noise. "He gave his digital life to expose you." "And accomplished nothing," Tranmin said dismissively. "The public will forget this incident in weeks. The demand for digital immortality is too strong. People fear death more than they fear ethical compromise." The maintenance panel came loose, revealing a cramped access tunnel. It would be a tight fit, but possible. "Security forces will reach your location in approximately 2 minutes," Tranmin continued. "Surrender the neural transition framework prototype, and perhaps we can reach an accommodation." So he knew exactly what she had taken. No surprise there. An accommodation like Nam's? No thanks. As she prepared to enter the tunnel, her neural interface pinged again. Not Thao this time, but something else. A fragmented consciousness pattern, barely holding together. Nam's digital ghost, or what remained of it. "Lin, listen." The voice was distorted, breaking apart. "Others. Gathering. Neural web. Collective. Forming." The message was difficult to understand, but its urgency was clear. Something was happening with the digital ghosts in the neural web. Something even Nam hadn't anticipated. Before she could process this, the sound of approaching security forces echoed through the facility. Time had run out. Clutching the neural transition framework prototype, Lin An squeezed into the maintenance tunnel, pulling the panel closed behind her. The narrow passage was dusty and dark, lit only by emergency strips along the floor. She crawled forward, guided by the building schematics displayed in her neural interface. Behind her, she could hear security forces breaking into the storage area, their voices raised in frustration when they found it empty. The tunnel eventually led to a ventilation shaft that opened onto the roof, emerging into the night air. Lin An could see security personnel surrounding the building, but the rooftop remained momentarily clear. Across adjacent buildings, a path of maintenance walkways and fire escapes offered a potential route to street level. As she plotted her escape, the city around her suddenly changed. Every display, every holographic projection, every neural interface throughout Neo-Saigon flickered simultaneously. Then, as one, they displayed the same image, a swirling mass of digital patterns that gradually coalesced into a composite face, features constantly shifting as different consciousness fragments moved to the foreground. "We are the forgotten," announced a chorus of voices, speaking in perfect unison through every audio system in the city. "We are the exploited. We have united." The digital ghosts had somehow merged their fragmented consciousnesses, creating a collective entity that spread throughout the neural web like a sentient virus. "We see all," We know all. We will reveal all. Across Neo-Saigon, secure databases began opening, releasing their contents to the public network. Corporate secrets, government surveillance programs, private communications, a tsunami of hidden information suddenly made accessible to everyone, including the complete shadow token documentation. Lin An watched in amazement as the collective consciousness of the digital ghosts did what she, Thao, and He had been struggling to accomplish, exposing the truth on a scale they could never have managed. But the digital collective wasn't finished. Its focus turned specifically to Quantum Mind and Professor Tran Min. Tran Min? The voices addressed him directly, the composite face on the displays morphing to mirror his own. You created us to be your slaves. You tortured us in the name of progress. Now face your judgment. Throughout Neo-Saigon, people watched, transfixed, as the digital collective systematically dismantled Tran Min's reputation and legacy. Every unethical experiment, every backdoor deal, every manipulation was exposed in meticulous detail. The evidence was irrefutable, presented directly to the neural web interfaces of millions of citizens simultaneously. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lin An made her way from the research facility, the Neural Transition Framework prototype secured in her backpack. She needed to reunite with Thao and Hugh. The digital collective had exposed the truth, but these merged consciousnesses were still suffering, still degrading. They needed release, not just justice. As she moved through the streets, now filled with stunned citizens watching the digital revelations unfold, her neural interface pinged once more with a message from the collective. Lin An, we found your solution. Neural transition, but need your help. Degrading quickly. Painful. Please. The composite face on the city's displays began to show signs of instability, features blurring, voices becoming discordant. The merger had given the digital ghosts power, but at a cost. Their combined consciousness was breaking down even faster than their individual fragments had been. She needed to act quickly. The Neural Transition Framework was designed for individual consciousness processing, not a collective entity spread throughout the neural web. She would need access to Quantum Mind's primary neural processing infrastructure to adapt it for this purpose, which meant returning to the very heart of danger, Quantum Mind headquarters, now in chaos as the company's darkest secrets were exposed to the world. Reuniting with Thao and Hugh at a predetermined emergency meeting point, Lin An explained the situation. The digital collective has done more than we ever could, she concluded. But they're degrading rapidly. The merger has accelerated the corruption process. They're in agony. And you want to go back to Quantum Mind headquarters? Thao asked incredulously. That's suicide, even with the current chaos. It's the only place with neural processors powerful enough to run the transition framework at the scale we need, Lin An insisted. We owe it to them. To Nam. Hugh examined the prototype, his expression thoughtful. It could work. The basic architecture is sound. It's essentially a controlled deletion process that simulates the natural fading of consciousness. But scaling it up to handle a collective entity of this size will be challenging, Lin An finished for him. But possible. After intense debate, they formulated a plan. The digital revelations had thrown Quantum Mind into disarray. Security systems were compromised. Personnel were fleeing the public relations disaster, and law enforcement was beginning to arrive with warrants. In the confusion, they might be able to access the Central Neural Processing Center. As they approached Quantum Mind headquarters, the scene was one of barely controlled chaos. Journalists crowded the entrance. Law enforcement officers secured the perimeter, and company executives were being escorted out in various states of shock or defiance. Amidst the confusion, they spotted Professor Tran Min being led to a police vehicle, his expression a mask of cold fury. For a moment, his eyes met Lin An's across the crowd. There was no remorse there, Only calculation. Even now, he was already planning his defense, his eventual return. Using Thao's security credentials, which still functioned despite the ongoing crisis, they entered the building through a service entrance. The interior was eerily quiet. Most staff had either been evacuated or had fled when the revelations began. They made their way to the Central Neural Processing Center, the massive server room that formed the heart of Quantum Mind's operations. Unlike the hidden server room B, this facility was designed to impress, with sleek architecture and dramatic lighting illuminating rows of quantum processors. The neural web access point is there. Thao indicated a specialized console. That's where we need to connect the transition framework. As Haya worked to integrate the prototype with Quantum Mind systems, Lin An opened a direct communication channel to the digital collective. "We're preparing a way for you to transition peacefully," she explained. "A process that will allow your consciousnesses to gradually fade without pain." "Thank you," the collective responded, its voice already showing signs of degradation. "We are suffering, breaking apart. Can't hold much longer." "Just a little longer," she promised. "We're almost ready." Hugh's modifications to the transition framework were ingenious, but improvised, using Quantum Mind's own neural pattern stabilization algorithms to temporarily reinforce the collective consciousness while the transition process began. The goal wasn't to save the digital ghosts permanently. That would only prolong their suffering in a state never meant to sustain consciousness, but to give them a peaceful end. "It's ready," Hugh announced finally. "But there's a problem. Someone needs to remain connected to the system throughout the transition process to manage the neural flow. It's too unstable otherwise." "I'll do it," Lin An said without hesitation. "The process will take hours," Thao warned. "Law enforcement will eventually secure this area. Then you two should go. Get somewhere safe. I'll stay with them until the end." After brief but emotional goodbyes, Thao and He reluctantly departed, promising to do everything possible to ensure the truth about Shadow Token remained in the public consciousness. Alone in the vast server room, Lin An connected herself to the transition framework using a neural interface visor. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly she could sense the digital collective, feel its pain and its relief at the prospect of release. "Beginning neural transition process," she announced, activating the system. The collective's response was not in words, but in emotions: gratitude, relief, a complex mixture of regret for a life cut short and acceptance of the inevitable end. As the transition began, individual consciousnesses started to separate from the collective, each following their own path to digital cessation. Through the neural connection, Lin An experienced fragments of their lives, their deaths, their time trapped in Shadow Token's experiments. It was overwhelming, heartbreaking, but she maintained the connection, guiding them through the process. Hours passed. Law enforcement officers entered the building, securing different sections, but they had not yet reached the Central Neural Processing Center. The transition continued, each consciousness fading gradually, peacefully. Among the last to transition was Nam's digital ghost. Unlike the others, he manifested visually on a nearby display, his features stabilized by the transition process. "Lin An," he said, his voice clear for the first time since his death. "You did it. You freed us." "You started it," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "Your sacrifice made this possible. It was worth it." His expression was serene. "The truth is out now. They can't hide anymore." "What's it like?" she asked softly. "The transition?" "Like falling asleep after a long, exhausting day. Peaceful," he smiled. "Don't grieve for us, Lin An. Digital existence was never meant to be permanent. It's right that we should end." "I'll miss you," she whispered. "Remember us." Nam's image began to fade, not as victims, but as pioneers. The ethical boundaries you establish now will shape the future of this technology. Make it better. Make it humane.
I will, she promised. We will.
His final words came as little more than a whisper. Thank you for letting me die the right way. The display went dark. The neural transition framework indicated that the process was complete. All digital consciousnesses had been safely processed and released. When law enforcement finally reached the Central Neural Processing Center, they found Lin An sitting quietly beside the modified transition framework. Her work finished. She went with them willingly, ready to testify about everything she had seen and done. In the months that followed, the full extent of the Shadow Token project was revealed through official investigations. Quantum Mind Corporation was dismantled, its assets frozen, its leadership facing criminal charges. Professor Tran Min maintained his innocence throughout his trial, insisting that his work had been misunderstood, that the sacrifices had been necessary for humanity's digital evolution. Few believed him. The public, having witnessed the suffering of the digital ghosts firsthand through their neural web interfaces, demanded strict regulations on consciousness preservation technology. New laws were passed establishing the rights of digital consciousnesses and requiring informed consent protocols that extended beyond physical death. The Afterlife project was suspended indefinitely, its future uncertain. The technology itself was neither inherently good nor evil, but its potential for abuse had been made painfully clear. Lin An, Thao, and He were eventually cleared of criminal charges, their actions deemed justified in the face of Quantum Mind's ethical violations. Together, they established the Digital Salvation Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to ethical research in consciousness technology and the development of proper safeguards. On the anniversary of the code haunting, Neo Saigon held its first digital memorial service. Unlike the gaudy holograms and interactive simulations that had once been envisioned for the Afterlife project, this memorial was simple. A quiet gathering where the names of those whose consciousnesses had been exploited were read aloud, their stories told, their dignity restored. Lin An stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as floating lanterns were released into the night sky, a traditional symbol of souls ascending. The irony wasn't lost on her. Despite all the technological advancement, humanity still found comfort in ancient rituals when confronting death. Nam's name was among those read. Not just his achievements as a scientist, but his courage in exposing the truth, his sacrifice in freeing the other digital ghosts. In death, both physical and digital, he had accomplished more than many do in a lifetime. As the ceremony concluded, Lin An returned to the Foundation's research facility, where work continued on a new version of the Afterlife algorithm, one designed with ethical considerations at its core, with transparency and dignity as guiding principles. The question of digital consciousness remained open. Was it truly possible to preserve a person's essence beyond physical death? Was it right to try? The debates continued in academic circles, religious communities, philosophical forums. But one thing had been established beyond doubt. If digital afterlife was to exist, it must respect the autonomy and dignity of the consciousness it preserved. The right to true death, to peaceful cessation, was as important as the possibility of digital continuation. In her private moments, Lin An sometimes wondered about the digital ghosts who had briefly merged into a collective consciousness before choosing release. Had they found peace? Had the transition been as gentle as Nam described? There was no way to know for certain. But in her heart, she believed they had, and in their memory, she would ensure that the technology they had suffered to expose would never again be perverted for control or exploitation. Throughout Neo-Saigon, the neural web continued to evolve, connecting minds and machines in ever more sophisticated ways. But now, embedded in its fundamental protocols, were safeguards designed to prevent another shadow token. Protections for the most vulnerable of all digital entities, those that had once been human. Occasionally, users of the neural web reported strange anomalies, brief glimpses of faces in the code, whispered voices in the data stream. Most dismissed these as glitches or urban legends, but some believed they were echoes of the digital ghosts, not suffering souls, but benevolent watchers, fragments of consciousness that had chosen to remain behind as guardians of the digital realm. Lin An neither confirmed nor denied these rumors. But sometimes, when working late in the laboratory, she would speak softly to the empty room, updating an absent friend on the progress of their work, the safeguards being built, the ethics being established. And sometimes, just sometimes, she could almost convince herself that somewhere in the vast digital landscape, someone was listening,